Side.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got back to the office I realized how loud birds can be.
We love them, but they tweet. Okay, so listen, thank you so much, Don Ritchie, for agreeing to talk a little bit to the folks at Concordia. I guess as an organizer of this conference, I was wondering, what were the main challenges you were facing?
Well, an international conference throws some extra challenges in, but every conference has challenges. You want a conference that's going to be diverse, that's going to be interesting, that's going to have some of the best work, that's going to have some really prominent people whose books you've read, and also some students who are just getting started, and you want to throw them all into the mix and come up with something stimulating and interesting and memorable. It's more complicated when you're dealing with people literally on every continent, in multiple languages. We had an English language committee and we had a Spanish language committee. But of course not everybody in the world speaks either English or Spanish, and some fall in between and they wonder what they could do. Well, this conference says that whatever the host nation's language is an official language with English and Spanish. In this case, we're meeting in a Spanish-speaking country. It creates problems for people who are Portuguese, for instance, or whatever. English, fortunately, has become sort of the universal language in a lot of ways, but even there, a lot of people have difficulty giving papers or making presentation, and you have to decide from what they submitted whether or not how it will fit. You have to sort of guess from the titles of their papers and the abstracts what their paper is going to be about. And then you have about maybe 30% of the proposals are panel proposals, where they've suggested everybody, including a chair and a commentator. And then the other 70% are single papers. So you have all of these single papers and you have to sort of mix them together. And you look for a common theme. Now, that's of course just on the English side.
Right.
In the meantime, there are people on the Spanish side doing the same things. And then at some point, in some cases, there were individual papers that didn't fit anywhere, so they put a Spanish paper in an English session, an English paper in a Spanish session. If I had known they were going to do that in some sessions, I would have tried to get somebody in the room who was bilingual who could, and we did have that in one session I went to, a bilingual person summarized the Spanish language
Good
paper.
idea.
But
because this is obviously an issue we face in Montreal,
of course,
for our conferences.
You have to be careful about it. We've had wonderful examples of the transcriptions and the translators in the past. My favorite was in Pietermaritzburg, South Africa, which was a KwaZulu area.
Okay.
The featured speaker spoke in Zulu. And in our earphones, we could hear the translator saying, oh my goodness, he's speaking so fast.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, well, it's an issue of our time, I mean, for sure. So, and then, like, to say, if I put it a little bit differently, what did you want thematically to be the carrying wave? Like, you're making a statement about where you think oral history is at, or something, yeah.
Well, first the committee picked a theme, and it was power and democracy. And this area of Catalonia feels very strongly about that. Mercedes Villanova, who brought us here, feels very strongly about that. But then beyond that, we had the many voices of oral history. We realized not everybody was going to speak to that theme, but we thought that would be a recurring theme through the whole program about is oral history inherently democratic? Where is the power relationships? How does it confront power? What does it tell us about power? And that was, in many of the sessions I went to, a recurring theme, and especially because we had several plenary sessions. Now, I'm all in favor of plenary sessions because it brings everybody together and it sets certain themes. And actually, one of the things that I was most pleased about this meeting was how often in the concurrent sessions, the speakers referred to something from the plenary session.
Right.
And that gave some coherence to it. It gave some touchstones and some points. Even some of the questions in the plenary sessions were repeated. And one of the people who asked a question in a plenary session, when he began his paper, said, my paper is all about the question that I asked in the plenary session.
Oh, really?
So those are all very important things. Now, beyond that, you don't want to have a theme that's so overwhelming that no one can speak about anything but that theme.
Yeah.
So we opened it up for, and we have performance, we have round tables, we have people who are talking about media, people who talk about food, people who are talking about all sorts of interesting subjects that aren't necessarily power and democracy. But the general theme of the conference, I think, was repeated sufficiently.
Right. I have to just agree that weaving of the alternating of the plenaries with the concurrent sessions really did seem to create a coherence in this 300-person,
Right.
meeting.
And of course, that's the one moment when you can come together and put your earphones on. They have simultaneous translation. We can't afford to do it in each of the concurrent sessions, but in the plenary sessions, we have a tradition of doing that.
So finally, maybe for people who maybe don't even know Yoha, and why would you encourage them to know more, to join?
Well, it's interesting. The very first oral history meeting I ever went to was in Canada. It was in 1976. It was the Oral History Association. It met in Ottawa, and then it met at the Chateau Montebello in Quebec. So we got a little taste of one part of Canada and another part of Canada. And because I was an American who had only been doing interviews with U.S. people. And I was suddenly confronted with the way Canadians were doing it. In fact, in those days, American oral historians were very archival and very much transcripts. And I went to Canada and I heard about oral history with an A because there was much more emphasis on sound. We had some great debates. It was a wonderful meeting. I came back, I was setting up a program that really helped me enormously. And I think AOHA does the same on a global basis. We all do our own location. We do our own nation, we do our own city, we do our own county or community. And then we come to a meeting here where people are doing entirely different places, entirely different locations, but they're all using the same methodology.
Right.
They're having the same problems, they're confronting the same issues, and they're trying different ways to do it. And I say, I could do that. And I go back and I try some of the things that I heard at a meeting I went to from people who are in Finland, or people who are in South Africa, or people in South America, or people in Asia. And it creates a global community that has a common language, which is the methodology of oral history. And you meet wonderful people, so that I've been coming now for many years, and it's become a great reunion to me. I see old friends that I only see every 2 years, unless they happen to visit the United States and stop in Washington, or I happen to visit their countries, and they're always very hospitable when I get there. So I really developed some wonderful wonderful friendships.
Yeah.
I was going to say weddings, because actually I went to a wedding that was in connection with an oral history meeting. The bride and groom knew that their friends were all going to be coming to town, so they had their wedding in conjunction with it.
Well, I can't think of a better way to close. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.